"Squatter!" Roland Baxter roared, his boots trampling the sacred earth as he stormed into Adsila's ritual circle, his eyes burning with scorn. She clutched Kohana, her son, as ceremonial herbs spilled and her wooden staff slipped, striking Baxter's arm. Shouts clashed with Kohana's choking coughs, the air heavy with accusations and the looming dread of losing all she cherished. Adsila, a 33-year-old Comanche woman in 1909 Oklahoma, bears the weight of her tribe's traditions as a ritual keeper, her heart scarred by her husband's death in a militia raid. She cares for her son, Kohana, whose lungs falter in their harsh world, while fiercely defending the sacred Highland from ranchers and officials eager to claim it. Her uneasy partnership with Laura, a white lawyer, sparks distrust among her people. Yet Adsila presses on, driven by a desperate need to shield her son and culture from a sinister scheme to unleash disease and drive the Comanche away forever. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the Comanche Highland, where Adsila knelt beside her son Kohana, guiding his small hands to pick sage for the evening ritual. She spoke softly, her voice weaving tales of their ancestors who danced under these same stars, binding their spirits to the land. Kohana's eyes sparkled with curiosity, but he paused to ask about his father, a question that made Adsila's heart clench. She brushed it aside, forcing a smile as a sudden chill wind swept through, rustling the grass like a warning. Kohana coughed, a dry, rattling sound, and Adsila's fingers trembled as she checked his forehead, her worry deepening. She urged him to rest, promising they'd finish preparing later, and tucked a blanket around him. As she stood, the distant thud of hooves broke the silence, growing louder, closer, like a storm about to break. Adsila's pulse quickened. She gripped Kohana's hand, her instincts screaming that trouble was coming. Laura rode up on a dusty mare, her leather satchel stuffed with legal papers that gleamed with hope and risk. She greeted Adsila with a cautious smile, urging her to review documents that might save the Highland from seizure. Kohana squinted at Laura, his voice sharp as he asked why his mother trusted a white woman. Adsila hesitated, her loyalty to her people warring with the need to protect her son, but she explained Laura was their ally. Laura handed Kohana a small vial of medicine, her gesture softening his glare, though Adsila's chest tightened with doubt. She warned Adsila of growing pressure from local officials, her words heavy with urgency. A lone hawk circled above, its cry piercing the air, and Adsila felt a prickle of unease, as if the spirits were watching, waiting for her choice. Roland Baxter's voice boomed across the Highland, calling Adsila a squatter as he marched in with Sheriff Garrett and 3 grim-faced officials. He pointed at the sacred ground, declaring it unclaimed wasteland ripe for his ranch. Garrett, his badge glinting, read a cold order for Adsila to vacate by dawn. She stood tall, her voice steady as she insisted the Highland belonged to the Comanche, its soil alive with their history. Baxter sneered, mocking their rituals as savage nonsense, his words cutting like a blade. One of his men kicked over a bundle of herbs, and Adsila's fists clenched, her anger simmering. Kohana stepped forward, small but defiant, only to be shoved by Baxter, his frail body stumbling as Adzila's heart roared with fear. Baxter's cruel laugh echoed as he called Kohana a sickly native brat, his words dripping with venom. Kohana hit the ground, clutching his chest, his coughs tearing through the air as his face paled. Adsila dropped to his side, her hands shaking as she cradled him, her voice a fierce whisper promising he'd be okay. Baxter loomed closer, taunting that Kohana wouldn't last the winter, each word fueling Adsila's rage. She grabbed a fallen staff, her eyes blazing as she warned Baxter to back off. He lunged, shoving her, and in a flash, she swung the staff, striking his shoulder. Blood seeped through his shirt as Garrett's gun gleamed, his shout accusing her of assault freezing her blood. Adsila held Kohana close, her voice rising above the chaos, vowing no one would steal their land. Baxter clutched his arm, screaming for Garrett to arrest her. Laura stepped in, her voice sharp, arguing Baxter's actions were illegal, but Garrett's cold stare dismissed her. He branded Adsila a criminal, his words a noose tightening around her. She looked at Kohana, his shallow breaths urging her to fight, and chose defiance over surrender. Pulling him to his feet, she fled toward the forest's edge, her heart pounding as branches scratched her skin. Baxter's men shouted, ready to pursue, but Laura blocked their path, buying Adsila precious seconds to vanish into the trees. In the forest's dim embrace, Adsila and Kohana crouched behind a thicket, their breaths ragged but safe for now. Kohana whispered, asking what they'd do, his wide eyes searching her face. But Adsila had no answer, her mind a storm of fear and resolve. She weighed fleeing deeper into the wild to shield her son and the Highland. Yet the thought of surrender flickered, a bitter temptation to save Kohana from pursuit. She shook it off, her jaw set, knowing her people's spirit demanded resistance. Checking Kohana's pulse, she cursed the lack of medicine, her guilt a heavy stone. She knelt, praying to the ancestors for strength, her voice trembling. A distant gunshot cracked through the trees, and Adsila's grip on Kohana tightened, the reality of being hunted sinking in. Adsila led Kohana to a hidden cave, its mouth veiled by vines, a secret refuge from her childhood. She draped leaves over the entrance, her hands steady despite the fear gnawing at her. Kohana slumped against the cold stone, his breath shallow, his small frame shivering. Adsila scoured the cave for water, dripping it into his mouth, but without medicine her efforts felt futile. To calm him, she recounted a Comanche tale of a warrior who outwitted a storm, her voice soft but breaking. A wolf's howl echoed outside, and Adsila clutched her knife, ready to defend her son. She resolved to find Laura, hoping her ally could bring aid, her heart torn between staying hidden and fighting back. Kohana's coughs echoed in the cave, each one a dagger to Adsila's heart as she held him, her warmth battling the damp chill. She searched the cave's edges for healing herbs, finding only a few wilted leaves, useless against his illness. Guilt choked her. She dragged him into this danger, her defiance now a chain around them both. Kohana stirred, his weak voice insisting he wanted to help save the Highland, his courage piercing her despair. Adsila kissed his forehead, promising to find a way, her tears hidden in the dark. A rustle outside made her freeze, knife raised, but it was only the wind, mocking her frayed nerves. She whispered to Kohana, vowing to protect him, her resolve hardening like the cave's ancient stone. Laura slipped through the forest, her lantern casting shadows as she reached the cave, her satchel heavy with medicine and bread. She whispered Adsila's name, relief flooding her when Adsila emerged, wary but desperate. Laura explained she dodged Garrett's questions in town, her voice low, urgent. She urged Adsila to return and fight legally, insisting the papers could save the Highland. Adsila's eyes narrowed, doubting a white woman's promises, her trust battered by history. Laura handed Kohana the medicine, his grateful nod softening Adsila's guard. She warned of bounty hunters closing in, her words a spark to Adsila's fear. Kohana's hand squeezed hers, and Adsila nodded, agreeing to hear Laura's plan, her hope fragile but alive. Laura knelt beside Adsila, her voice steady as she revealed Baxter's history of bribing officials to steal Comanche land. She pulled out faded documents, proof of his schemes, but admitted they lacked the weight to convict him. Adsila's fingers traced the papers, her mind racing as she asked about rumors of sick cattle, a shadow crossing her face. Laura's eyes darkened, suspecting Baxter might be spreading disease to force the tribe out. A tactic as old as conquest. Adsila's breath caught, the idea a poison in her thoughts, but she vowed to uncover the truth. She tucked Kohana into a blanket, entrusting him to Laura's care, her heart heavy with the risk. Steeling herself, she planned to infiltrate Baxter's camp that night, her fear drowned by a mother's fierce love. Adsila sat by Kohana in the dim cave, her heart heavy with Hastien's warnings that working with Laura could betray the tribe. She looked at her son, his shallow breaths, a reminder she couldn't give up, his life tied to the Highlands' fate. Kneeling, she whispered a prayer to the ancestors, begging for guidance, her voice trembling with doubt. Memories of her husband flooded back, his defiance against raiders fueling her resolve. Laura's voice broke the silence, urging Adsila to trust the law, her eyes earnest but foreign. Adsila's jaw tightened. She agreed to Laura's plan but demanded secrecy, fearing her people's judgment. As Kohana slept, she sharpened her knife, her mind set on sneaking into Baxter's camp under moonlight, her fear swallowed by a fierce need to protect her son. Hastien's shadow loomed at the cave's entrance, his weathered face stern as he confronted Adsila. He accused her of dishonoring the tribe by aligning with Laura, his voice low but cutting. Adsila stood firm, explaining she fought for Kohana and the Highland, her words laced with desperation. Hastiin recounted a bitter tale of a lawyer who once betrayed the Comanche, his eyes distant with pain. He demanded she cut ties with Laura or face exile, each word a stone on her chest. Kohana stirred, his weak voice defending his mother, calling her the keeper of their rituals. Hastien's gaze softened, but he left without a word, leaving Adsila torn between loyalty and survival, her heart aching as she held her son close. In Baxter's camp, lamplight flickered as he barked orders to Amos, his voice thick with rage over Adsila's escape. Amos suggested torching the Highland to flush her out, his grin cruel as he polished his knife. Baxter nodded, insisting it look accidental, his greed for the land consuming him. Amos reported spotting Laura near the forest, suspecting she hid Adsila, his eyes glinting with malice. Baxter scrawled a letter to Carter, detailing their progress, his pen scratching like a predator's claw. A scout burst in, claiming Adsila was near a cave, and Baxter's laugh echoed, cold and triumphant. He ordered Amos to track her, his confidence masking a flicker of fear that Adsila's defiance could unravel his plans. Kohana's voice trembled in the cave, recounting a story of Comanche warriors who outran the wind, his eyes bright despite his fever. Adsila watched, her heart swelling with pride but breaking at his frailty, his coughs punctuating the tale. He spoke of the Highland as their soul, his words igniting her fading hope. She hugged him tightly, promising to guard their legacy, her tears dampening his hair. From sage leaves she crafted a small charm, tying it around his neck, her fingers steady with love. Kohana pressed a smooth stone into her palm, calling it his lucky charm, his smile fragile but fierce. Adsila clutched the stone, her resolve hardening, ready to face Baxter's wrath for her son's future. Adsila stumbled upon a folded paper near the cave, tucked under a rock, its scroll warning of sick cattle in Baxter's camp. Her pulse raced. Someone was helping her, a shadow ally in this fight. She hid the note from Kohana, shielding him from more worry, his coughs already too heavy a burden. Scanning the trees, she found no trace of the messenger, the silence eerie yet charged with promise. Laura read the note, her face grim as she confirmed rumors of diseased livestock, linking it to Baxter's schemes. Adsila's stomach churned, the pieces of a darker plot falling into place. She vowed to raid Baxter's camp for proof, her fear outmatched by a burning need to expose the truth. A figure in a feathered cloak emerged from the dusk, his face hidden as he called himself the Wind of the Highland. He handed Adsila another note, pointing to a hidden stash in Baxter's camp, his voice low and urgent. Before she could ask his name, He vanished into the trees, leaving only the rustle of leaves. The note detailed a shed filled with Baxter's secrets, and Adsila's heart pounded with cautious hope. She questioned his motives, her trust battered, yet his Comanche cloak felt like a sign. Laura warned it might be a trap, her brow furrowed, but Adsila's gut urged her to act. She kissed Kohana's forehead, promising to return, and slipped into the night, her knife gleaming with purpose. Under a moonless sky, Adsila crept into Baxter's camp, her breath shallow as she dodged a snoring guard. She slipped into a cluttered shed, her hands rifling through papers until she found a report of cattle dying from a strange illness. A letter caught her eye, hinting at a plan to spread disease, its words chilling her blood. Footsteps crunched outside, Amos's voice barking orders, and Adsila's heart leapt to her throat. She stuffed the papers into her shirt, her fingers trembling as she crouched behind a crate. A dog's growl rose, sniffing close, but she held still, barely breathing. Slipping out as the guard turned, she sprinted into the forest, the weight of her discovery fueling her escape. Adsila read the stolen letter by firelight, her hand shaking as it revealed Baxter and Carter's plot to unleash diseased cattle on the Highland. The plan was to sicken the tribe, forcing them to flee, a betrayal so vile it stole her breath. She clutched the paper, imagining Kohana's fragile lungs exposed to such evil, her rage a wildfire. The letter outlined land sales to Carter's company, each word a nail in her people's coffin. She showed it to Laura, who nodded grimly, confirming its legal weight. Atsila's voice broke as she swore to stop Baxter, her fear for Kohana drowning in a mother's fury. She tucked the letter close, its truth a weapon she'd wield to save her son and her land. Laura pored over the letter in the cave, her eyes scanning for legal flaws, her voice steady as she planned to use it against Baxter. She mentioned a federal agent she could contact, a slim chance at justice, her hope cautious but real. Teaching Adsila to present the evidence, she spoke of courtrooms and laws, worlds Adsila barely knew. Adsila's thoughts drifted to Kohana, his weakening body a ticking clock, her fear sharp as a blade. She asked Laura to guard him if she were caught, her voice cracking with vulnerability. Laura promised, her hand on Adsila's shoulder, a bond forming in the dark. They plotted to reveal the truth, their voices hushed but fierce, united against a common enemy. Amos prowled the camp's edge, his boots scuffing dirt as he spotted faint tracks near the shed. He reported to Baxter, his voice low. Certain Adsila had been there, his fingers itching for a fight. Baxter's face darkened, ordering more guards, his paranoia creeping in. Amos led a posse into the forest, their lanterns casting eerie glows, his shouts echoing as they hunted Adsila. She hid behind a boulder, her heart hammering, the stolen papers pressed against her chest. Throwing a stone to distract them, she slipped deeper into the trees, her breath ragged but silent. Amos cursed, vowing to catch her for the bounty, his rage a shadow trailing her through the night. Kohana's coughs tore through the cave's stillness, his small body shaking as Adsila held him, her heart fracturing with each ragged breath. She pressed her cheek to his feverish forehead, whispering prayers to the ancestors, begging for his life. Desperate, she scoured the cave for herbs, finding only a sprig of wilted yarrow, useless against his worsening illness. Kohana's eyes fluttered open, his voice faint but firm, saying he wanted to see his mother defeat Baxter. Adsila's tears fell as she kissed his hands, promising to fight for him, her voice choked with love and fear. She pleaded with Laura to fetch more medicine from town, her desperation raw. A cold gust swept through the cave, chilling her bones, as if the spirits mourned with her. Adsila tucked a blanket around Kohana, vowing to end this nightmare before it claimed her son. Under a gnarled oak, Adsila gathered the tribe in secret, her voice steady as she held up Baxter's letter, revealing his plan to poison the Highland with diseased cattle. Murmurs rippled through the group, some eyes wide with shock, others narrowed in doubt. She spoke of Kohana, her son fighting for breath, urging them to protect their future. The young warrior nodded, inspired, but Hastiin stood silent, his face unreadable. Adsila raised the letter like a banner, swearing to stop Baxter, her words fierce with conviction. An elder questioned her alliance with Laura, and Adsila's heart sank, but she begged for their trust. As the group dispersed, she felt the weight of their divided hopes, her resolve burning brighter. Hastiin stepped forward, his voice low, accusing Adsila of recklessness for trusting Laura, a white outsider. He warned her plan could doom the tribe, his eyes heavy with past betrayals by false allies. Adsila countered, her voice trembling, saying she fought for Kohana and the Highland soul. Hastiin shared a story of a lawyer who once sold their land, his pain sharpening each word. He demanded she hand over the letter, threatening exile if she refused. Kohana's weak voice rose, defending his mother as the keeper of their rituals, his courage piercing the tension. Hastian's stern gaze wavered, but he turned away, leaving Adsila with a knot of fear and determination. She hugged Kohana, whispering thanks, her heart torn between her tribe and her son. Amos ambushed Laura on a dusty trail, his knife gleaming as he demanded to know Adsila's hiding place. Laura's heart raced, but she feigned compliance, her voice steady to buy time. He fired a shot into the sky, the crack echoing, and Laura bolted, her boots slipping on loose gravel. She dove into a thicket, thorns tearing her skin, her breath ragged with panic. Amos's curses followed, his boots crunching closer, but she crawled deeper, hiding in shadows. Laura scribbled a note for Adsila, warning of the threat, and slipped it to a passing trader. She limped toward town, her ankle throbbing, fear for Adsila and Kohana driving her forward. Amos reported back to Baxter, his rage simmering, vowing to trap them all. Adsila found Laura's note, her blood running cold as she read of Amos's attack. She tracked Laura's trail, her heart pounding, finding her crumpled in a grove, blood seeping from a gash. Adsila tore a strip from her shawl, binding Laura's wound with steady hands, her voice soft but urgent. She helped Laura stagger back to the cave, dodging Amos's scouts, her senses sharp as a hawk's. Laura apologized, her voice weak, blaming herself for drawing danger. But Adsila shook her head, calling her a true ally. Inside the cave, Laura collapsed, and Adsila brewed herb tea, her gratitude mingling with fear. She checked on Kohana, his shallow breaths fueling her resolve to end Baxter's reign, her hands clenched with purpose. Whispers of Laura's presence spread among the tribe, fueling distrust as elders accused Adsila of betraying their ways. A group of young warriors rallied to her, eager to fight Baxter, their fists raised in defiance. Older members sided with Hastiin, demanding Adsila's exile, their voices sharp with fear. Adsila met with a few in secret, her eyes pleading as she explained Baxter's plot to sicken their land. One elder revealed Hastian's own clash with Baxter, a threat that silenced him, and Adsila's hope flickered. She spoke of Kohana's dream to save the Highland, her voice breaking, swaying a few hearts. Determined, she planned to confront Hastiin again, her spirit unyielding despite the tribe's fracture. A note appeared under a stone near the cave, signed by the wind of the Highland, pointing Adsila to a second cache of Baxter's documents. Her pulse quickened. This mysterious ally was risking everything, but doubt gnawed at her. She entrusted Kohana to Laura, her heart aching as she kissed his fevered brow. The note led to a ravine, and she spotted the cloaked figure watching, his silhouette vanishing before she could call out. Laura's warning of a trap echoed, but Adsila pressed on, her knife ready. She memorized the note's directions, burning it to ash, her trust in the stranger fragile but necessary. Under starlight, she set out, her steps silent, driven by the Highland's call. Adsila slipped into a rickety barn near Baxter's camp, her breath shallow as she sifted through crates of papers. She found letters between Baxter and Carter, confirming plans to sell the Highland once the tribe fled, her stomach twisting with disgust. One note detailed the diseased cattle, a deliberate plague, and her hands shook with rage. She copied key lines, tucking them into her shirt, her fingers swift but careful. A guard's cough sounded outside, and she ducked behind a barrel, her heart thumping like a drum. A rat scurried past, nearly betraying her, but she held still, sweat beading on her brow. She escaped as dawn broke, the papers a heavy promise of justice against Baxter's evil. Carter's spies reported the barn breach, and he roared at Amos to burn it, his voice thick with panic. Flames devoured the structure, papers turning to ash as Adsila watched from a hill, her chest tightening with despair. She clutched the copied notes, her only proof, now seeming frail against Carter's ruthlessness. Laura joined her, confirming the fire's devastation, her face pale with shared defeat. Adsila's knees buckled, her dream of saving the Highland crumbling like the charred wood below. She thought of Kohana, his life slipping away, and screamed into the dawn, her voice raw with anguish. The loss felt final, but a spark of defiance lingered, refusing to let Baxter win. Adsila slumped beside Kohana, her tears falling as she confessed the burned evidence, her voice hollow with failure. She considered fleeing far away, saving her son from this fight, but the thought felt like betrayal. Kohana stirred, his weak hand touching hers, calling her the tribe's hope, his faith a light in her darkness. Memories of her husband's stand against raiders surged, his courage now hers. Adsila wiped her eyes, her jaw set, refusing to surrender. Laura brought news of a federal agent willing to listen, a faint chance at justice. Adsila gripped Kohana's stone, its weight grounding her, whispering a vow to fight on for her son and her people. Kohana's voice, weak but clear, filled the cave with a tale of Comanche warriors who defied impossible odds, his eyes glowing with a fire that belied his frail body. He called the Highland their heart, his words piercing Adsila's despair, rekindling her will to fight. A harsh cough interrupted him, and Adsila held him close, her heart breaking as she felt his trembling frame. She whispered of their ancestors' strength, promising to carry it for him, her tears falling onto his hair. Kohana slipped a woven cord necklace into her hand, saying it held the spirit's protection, his smile faint but fierce. Adsila tied it around her neck, its weight a vow to save their land. She kissed his forehead, her love a shield against the fear gripping her. His courage, so pure, urged her to rise, her resolve now an unbreakable flame. Laura sat with Adsila by the cave's dim fire, her voice steady as she proposed a bold plan, a public protest at Carter's company headquarters to expose Baxter's plot. She explained that shaming them openly could force action, her eyes alight with cautious hope. Adsila hesitated, picturing Kohana's worsening health, her fear clashing with the need to act. Laura had drafted letters to local papers, aiming to draw a crowd, her determination infectious. She spoke of the federal agent, a potential ally if they could present their case, her words a lifeline. Adsila nodded, her hands trembling as she agreed, driven by her son's fading strength. They mapped out the protest, their whispers urgent, a shared dream of justice binding them closer. Adsila faced the tribe under a twilight sky, her voice steady as she sought their blessing for the protest, holding up the copied notes as proof of Baxter's evil. She spoke of the diseased cattle, her words sharp, warning of the threat to their children. A few warriors cheered, their fists raised, but Hastien's silence loomed heavy, his doubt a shadow. Adsila's voice broke as she mentioned Kohana's fight for life, pleading for unity to save their home. An elder questioned her trust in Laura, and Adsila's chest tightened, but she swore to honor Comanche ways. She tasked young runners with spreading word of the protest, their eager nods fueling her hope. As the meeting ended, she felt the tribe's fragile trust, her heart pounding with the weight of their future. Adsila and Laura gathered the tribe on the Highland's edge, the dawn painting the sky in fiery hues as they prepared for the protest. Adsila assigned runners to carry messages, their swift feet a promise of unity. Laura rehearsed a speech, exposing Baxter's plot, her voice firm despite the risk. Adsila wove protective charms from sage, tying them to each warrior's wrist, her hands steady with purpose. She shared a story of their ancestors' battles, her words lifting spirits, igniting courage. Kohana, too weak to stand, sketched a banner with trembling hands, his effort tearing at Adsila's heart. A warm breeze stirred the grass, and Adsila saw it as a sign, her resolve deepening as they readied to face Carter's empire. Sheriff Garrett's men stormed the Highland, their boots trampling sacred ground as he fired a warning shot, demanding the tribe disperse. Adsila stepped forward, her voice a defiant roar, refusing to yield their land. Garrett sneered, ordering her arrest, his hand on his gun. But the tribe formed a wall around her, their unity a shield. A deputy struck Hastiin, who crumpled with a groan, blood trickling from his brow. Laura rushed to him, binding his wound with her scarf, her hands shaking but sure. Adsila's scream rallied the tribe, her eyes blazing as she called for strength. Garrett's men hesitated, outnumbered, and retreated, but Adsila knew the fight was far from over, her heart racing with fear and fury. Hastiin stirred, his eyes meeting Adsila's as he clasped her hand, his voice hoarse with regret for doubting her. He admitted Baxter had threatened his life, a secret that fueled his caution, his confession raw. Adsila forgave him, her touch gentle, seeing him as a father in that moment. Hastiin stood, addressing the tribe, urging them to trust Adsila, his words reigniting their spirit. The crowd roared, their voices a thunder of unity, lifting Adsila's heart. She helped Hastiin sit, her gratitude mingling with resolve, knowing his support changed everything. She vowed to lead them to victory, her eyes fixed on the Highland, now a symbol of their shared fight. A new note from the wind of the Highland appeared, tucked in a crevice, naming a witness, a former Carter worker who knew the truth. Adsila's pulse quickened. This ally was her shadow guide, and she trusted his lead. She left Kohana with Laura, her heart aching as she whispered a promise to return. Tracking the note's clues, she found a shack where the witness hid, his eyes darting with fear. The wind appeared briefly, cloaked, handing her a sealed letter before vanishing, his silence a mystery. Laura's warning of traps echoed, but Adsila persuaded the witness to speak, her voice firm yet kind. She led him back, her knife ready, hope rising like a fragile dawn. The witness, a gaunt man named Eli, sat in the cave, his voice trembling as he confirmed Carter's order to release sick cattle. He produced a crumpled letter from Carter, its ink faded but damning, and Adsila's breath caught at its weight. She photographed it with Laura's camera, her hands steady, preserving their proof. Eli feared retaliation, his hands shaking, but Adsila promised protection, her voice a vow. Laura analyzed the letter, nodding at its legal strength, her eyes bright with possibility. Adsila imagined exposing Baxter, her heart soaring, but Kohana's coughs grounded her, a reminder of time slipping away. She thanked Eli, her gratitude fierce, feeling victory within reach. Baxter raged in his camp, slamming his fist on a table as a scout reported the witness's betrayal. He ordered Amos to trap Adsila, his voice a snarl, fear creeping into his eyes. Amos set a snare near town, his men hiding in the brush, their rifles glinting. Adsila sensed the ambush, her instincts sharp, and veered into a gully, thorns tearing her skin. A bullet grazed her arm, pain flaring, But she ran, her breath ragged. Laura found her, binding the wound with cloth, her voice urgent but calm. Adsila clutched the copied notes, swearing Baxter wouldn't stop her, her defiance a fire that burned through the pain. Kohana's coughs turned to gasps, blood flecking his lips as Adsila held him, her screams echoing in the cave. She begged the ancestors to spare him, her voice raw, tears streaming down her face. Kohana whispered he wanted to see her win, his eyes dim but resolute, breaking her heart. Adsila promised, her voice cracking, vowing to fight for him. Laura brought medicine, but Kohana's body rejected it, his breath shallower. Adsila slipped his woven necklace onto her wrist, its weight her anchor, drawing strength from his love. She resolved the protest was their last chance, her fear for her son fueling a desperate, unyielding courage. Adsila led the Comanche tribe to the iron gates of Carter's company headquarters, her heart pounding as she raised a banner painted with Kohana's trembling hands. Her voice rang out, demanding justice for her people, each word a spark igniting the crowd. Laura stood beside her, reading Baxter's letter aloud, her voice clear, exposing the plot to poison the Highland. The tribe chanted, their voices a rolling thunder, drawing reporters who scribbled furiously. A few townsfolk jeered, calling them savages, but Adsila stood tall, her eyes fierce, ignoring their hate. Kohana sat in a makeshift chair, his frail smile giving her strength, though his shallow breaths tore at her soul. She grasped his hand, feeling the tribe's unity surge, a tide ready to sweep away their enemies. The wind of the Highland stepped from the crowd, pulling back his feathered cloak to reveal a weathered face, his voice steady as he declared himself a former Carter worker. He recounted witnessing Baxter release diseased cattle, his words heavy with truth, silencing the onlookers. Adsila's eyes widened, naming him a Comanche hero, her gratitude raw. He handed Laura a bundle of documents, their edges worn but damning, and she clutched them tightly. The crowd cheered, their voices shaking the gates, as hope flared in Adsila's chest. He whispered he'd summoned a federal agent, and Adsila's heart leapt, sensing victory near. She stood closer to Kohana, her resolve a blazing fire. A federal agent pushed through the crowd, his badge glinting as he demanded to see Laura's evidence. Adsila spoke, her voice trembling with urgency, detailing Baxter's plan to sicken her people, her words raw with pain. Laura presented the letters and photographs, her hands steady, each page a nail in Baxter's coffin. The agent nodded, promising a full investigation, his tone grave but fair. He ordered his men to protect the tribe, their rifles a barrier against Garrett's lurking deputies. Laura snapped more photos, sending them to newspapers, her eyes fierce with purpose. Adsila felt a surge of hope, her hand on Kohana's shoulder, but his weakening grip reminded her time was slipping away. Baxter stormed into the protest, his face red as he shouted denials, claiming the letters were lies. Laura read the damning words aloud again, her voice cutting through his bluster, and the crowd booed, their anger a rising storm. Eli, the witness, stepped forward, his voice shaking but clear, recounting Carter's orders to spread disease. Adsila locked eyes with Baxter, her stare unyielding, watching him falter. He tried to flee, shoving through the crowd, but the agent's men blocked him, their hands firm. Reporters swarmed, pens flying, capturing his disgrace. Adsila's heart soared, a fleeting triumph, but Kohana's cough beside her grounded her, his life the true cost of this fight. Garrett stood before the agent, his badge tarnished as he stammered, admitting he took Baxter's bribes. The agent's voice was cold, ordering his arrest, and handcuffs clicked around Garrett's wrists, his head bowed in shame. The tribe cheered, their voices a victory cry, naming Adsila their champion. She hugged Laura, her gratitude spilling over, tears mixing with pride. Laura vowed to keep fighting in court, her hand squeezing Adsila's, a bond forged in battle. Adsila turned to Kohana, his eyes dim but proud, and her heart clenched, fearing the cost of their triumph. The crowd's roar faded as she knelt beside him, her world narrowing to his fragile breath. Carter's carriage rattled toward the town's edge, his face pale as he fled the protest's chaos. A group of young Comanche warriors spotted him, blocking the road with raised spears, their eyes fierce. Adsila confronted him, calling him a destroyer of her people, her voice a blade. Carter sneered, threatening retribution, but the agent's men surrounded him, their guns drawn. A letter fell from his coat, its words confirming his guilt, and Adsila snatched it, handing it to the agent. The crowd watched, silent, as Carter was led away, his empire crumbling. Adsila returned to Kohana, her relief bitter, his weakening form a reminder that her fight wasn't over. Kohana's body gave out as the protest ended, his breath stopping in Adsila's arms, his eyes closing forever. She screamed, cradling him, begging him to stay, her voice raw with anguish. Laura called for a doctor, her hands shaking, but no one could save him. Kohana's final smile lingered, whispering he was proud, shattering Adsila's heart. The tribe knelt around them, their prayers rising like smoke, honoring his spirit. Adsila clutched his necklace, its beads warm against her skin, her world collapsing into grief. She kissed his forehead, her tears falling, vowing his death would fuel her fight, a promise carved in her soul. Adsila sat by Kohana's body, her eyes empty, guilt crashing over her like a wave for failing to save him. Laura knelt beside her, her voice soft, saying Kohana's courage inspired them all, her touch a quiet comfort. Hastiin approached, his voice gentle, calling Kohana the Highland spirit, his words easing Adzila's pain. She stared at the necklace, its weight a reminder of her son's love, her heart a battlefield of loss and resolve. The tribe brought wildflowers, laying them around Kohana, their colors a farewell. Adsila whispered to him, promising to carry his dream, her voice breaking. She stood, her grief raw but her purpose clear, ready to honor her son. The tribe gathered on the Highland for Kohana's farewell, their voices weaving a Comanche song, its notes heavy with love and loss. Hastiin declared Adsila their firekeeper, his words crowning her as their heart, and the crowd nodded, their eyes wet. Young warriors carved Kohana's name into a stone, its letters a vow to remember. Adsila spoke of his dream to save the land, her voice steady despite her tears, stirring the tribe's pride. She swore to protect the Highland, her hand on the stone, feeling his spirit. Laura promised legal support, her presence a bridge between worlds. The song rose, wrapping Adsila in her people's strength, her son's legacy now her guide. The Highlands stood free, Baxter and Carter locked in chains, their plot exposed to the world's judgment. Adsila walked its sacred paths, her rituals unbroken, the tribe's respect a mantle she wore for Kohana. She and Laura built a lodge to preserve Comanche ways, their hands joined in shared purpose. The truth of the diseased cattle spread, a warning to others, its shadow banished by justice. Kohana's sacrifice burned in Adsila's heart, his memory a flame driving her forward. She stood on the Highland, feeling his spirit in the wind, her grief tempered by pride. The tribe's unity, forged in loss, stood as a testament to courage against oppression, a legacy for her son.